Good morning, everyone. It is now 11 o'clock on Thursday morning, and we like to begin on time so that we can give everyone who is involved in our meeting today the opportunity to answer any questions that may come our way. Before we begin, I'd like to read a statement that I have been reading at the beginning of all of our critical conversations. And it has to do with certain ground rules that we have created for these conversations. The trend in politics and popular culture is to regard an opinion differing from one's own as unworthy of consideration or even mentioning. One end result of such a position is the permission that we often give ourselves to disrespect someone with an opinion that is not our own. Another result is the stifling of the sort of conversation that could ultimately mend walls or result in a higher level of civility among ourselves and the respect that all humanity deserves. Here at Southern, we believe this culture of disrespect runs counter to the values Christians find in the Bible. Indeed, Southern's mission and values are founded on mutual respect for all individuals, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, creed, sexual identification, or opinions. And in keeping with those values, we have instituted some rules that all individuals participating in today's conversation are expected to keep. They are as follows. A person will not speak unless recognized by the moderator. A speaker will limit their comments to no more than a minute of time. A speaker will be given the opportunity to make those comments without interruption. A speaker will avoid using profane, vulgar, tasteless, or morally crude language. All members in the room will be respectful of differences of opinion. No members in the room will belittle in verbal or nonverbal communication another person whose opinion is different from their own. And no member in the room will use the discussion as an opportunity to disrespect others in their discussions in social media or any other communication platforms. In summary, in an effort to have the critical conversation that we hope to have today, we agree to these rules of decorum to facilitate the candor and openness necessary to make these discussions valuable to our community. At this time, I'd ask our Vice President for Spiritual Life, Joseph Kabaz, to lead us with prayer.
Okay, let us pray together. Our loving Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity to gather here as a campus body together online and have these important critical conversations. Lord, we thank you for the miracles that you have been doing here on campus and for your work of grace. It is nothing short of a miracle that we're able to gather here together. Father God, we thank you for the work not only that you're doing on campus, but for the work that you're doing inside of us. We are each a work of progress, and we thank you for your grace and mercy towards us. Right now, dear Lord, we pray that you help us be engaged in this critical conversation, and we pray that as we have these important conversations together, we may more faithfully and fully follow you. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Again, thank you for joining us today. We do have some questions already. The format today will be that questions will be directed to Dr. Smith to answer. He may defer the answering of the questions and request that one of the vice presidents who are also in the room today to answer the question for him. And he would be doing that not because he wants to get out of answering a difficult question, but simply because there may be somebody who could answer it a little better than he could. And that is not to suggest that Dr. Smith couldn't answer the question well. It's just simply that there are others who are sometimes on the front lines and could answer a certain question better than he could. Well, Dr. Smith, we already have some questions, and one of them has to do with the fact that you are retiring and have made that announcement. And so, but this question also has to do with graduation. So will we be having an in-person graduation? And if so, will Dr. Smith still be meeting us across the stage? That was my dream, to have Dr. Smith hand me my degree, and I'd be heartbroken if he doesn't.
Oh my. Well, I'm sure it would be my dream to hand you your diploma as well. It's a highlight. College graduation service is about unlike anything else I know in terms of a sense of achievement and shared family experience, including our campus family. And the more personable in so many ways, the better. But that really isn't my call. There is a graduation committee that determines the details for each service. And in a COVID-19 world, our regular graduation process is significantly transformed. I have not heard what is expected for December graduation. I don't know if this is referencing that or May. Pretty sure we haven't made a determination about May yet. But Dr. Young works with the committee that makes these decisions. And Dr. Young, I wonder if you have any insights as to how a graduation would occur, including do we expect that it will be a live service as opposed to a virtual graduation?
All right, well, thank you for that question. At this moment, we plan on having a December graduation that looks very much like, that will look very much like the graduation we held in August. That graduation was significantly amended to provide protection for all the participants, their families, as well as the faculty and staff of the university. And if you think about the most risky position of all in a graduation ceremony would have to be the person who shakes everyone's hand. That would be the president. And so we had, in setting up the August graduation, looked carefully at how some other colleges and universities had accomplished that, most notably Oakwood University. And we very much liked how they had protected their president during that ceremony by virtue of having the photograph of the president and the person receiving their diploma cover standing a little bit apart from one another and not shaking hands, which in our COVID world seems to make a lot of sense. And then we do have a cutout of the president, which is down at the base of the steps, where students can take a photograph with the president shaking their hand using the cutout. And it's remarkable what you can do with photographs and two-dimensional images. And so it looks very realistic when you take your photograph shaking the president's two-dimensional cutout. And that photograph is part of the photographic package graduates receive as part of their participation in the graduation ceremony. So we will have a face-to-face graduation. The safety protocols in place in August will be followed. That will include protecting our president and providing students who are graduating with an opportunity to shake the virtual president's hand for a photograph.
Dr. Young, I'm going to refer this question to you as well, simply because it's a follow-up to what you have just stated. So what are we anticipating for the May graduation? Will it be a mirror of the December graduation? Will it occur early on the same date that it is currently in the calendar? What are we anticipating for May?
Of course, May is a little over 6 months away. And so our ability to anticipate what the conditions will be in May are a little more difficult because of how far away that is. I suspect that our COVID experience isn't going to be altered a whole lot between now and May unless God miraculously provides a vaccine in enormous quantities between now and May. And I am one who believes in miracles. And so if that were to happen, I would attribute it wholly to God's providence. But failing that, we will look at our begin planning for our May graduation shortly, and will in all probability have to have safety precautions in place for that graduation ceremony as well. I've asked Eve Knight, the administrative assistant who works in my area and oversees planning for graduation, to begin working with the Chattanooga Convention Center on what it would look like if every chair in the convention center were 6 feet apart. I have no idea what the seating capacity of the convention center is under those circumstances, but we are beginning some preliminary planning and looking to see whether or not we could pull off May graduation face-to-face with safety protocols in the convention center.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Smith, this next question also has to do with second semester. And it is probably the topic that is of most interest to the majority of our students right now. Many students are saying that the decision to shorten spring break was rash and unfair due to the fact that the student body was not consulted. Many people had already made plans with family, and the effects of this decision on mental health mid-semester were not fully considered. I've also heard many students making plans to skip school for that week and travel despite the change. Can you explain why the benefits outweigh the cost with this decision, specifically when it comes to the mental health of our students?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think the concerns as they're expressed are absolutely legitimate concerns. I'll probably rely on Dr. Young to share at least some about how the decision was made, since it's the academic calendar and it's people in his arena who most dealt with that. But certainly I was familiar with the decision and would like to share a few things about the making of it. One of the things about making decisions in a COVID-19 world is that almost all of them are made far too quickly, but are forced by circumstances to be subject to that kind of timing. And the opportunity for full inclusion or input into decisions is extremely limited. We have been, ever since last summer, as an administrative team, involved in making decisions that are COVID-19 related, hundreds, literally hundreds upon hundreds of decisions. I think they've just given birth to themselves. You know, you make one decision and then another one springs up. You make that one, another one springs up. It is the nature of making decisions in the COVID-19 world, and none of us like it. We would all like to be more deliberate. We would all like to be more inclusive, but circumstances press on us in ways that are even hard to describe, but it happens. And I think this one instance is certainly an example of that. So I'm sorry for those students who felt like more student input should have been part of it. We would not have been opposed to that at all. But as I think Dr. Young will share, we had about 1 week to 2 weeks, depending on how you look at it, in order to make this decision. And it is a significant decision. Another thing I would say about it, and that is that we are still trying to understand next semester what the COVID-19 landscape will be for an institution like ours, where we are attempting to provide a live in-class learning experience, which you students told us is what you most wanted. And we're still trying to understand how we can best do that. Right now, I would say as of today, because I checked on this a little earlier today, there's very little reason to believe that there will be a vaccine that will have been tested, will have been validated and approved by governing agencies that have to do that, that will be successfully marketed and then will be available and then applied to enough people to be effective probably before the end of next semester. I would say that would seem to be very unlikely. For those of us who kind of live in a COVID-19 world where we're continually trying to understand it and reading everything we can and asking questions and learning all the time. It is a very complex world. But the idea of a vaccine for second semester, which is pivotal in making these kinds of decisions, pivots somewhat around the idea of what's called herd immunity. Medical experts believe that if enough people get inoculated by a validated, effective vaccine, that it might be possible to function in a more normal way in various environments, including a campus like our own, where we might not even have to wear masks or worry as much about distancing. Some of those things may remain, I'm not sure. But their projection is that 70% of the population would have to be immunized in order to have any hope of what's called, again, herd immunity. And that 70% figure, based on any projections that I know, is so far beyond the reach of anything currently thought possible that we're just having to be cautious as we look to next semester and figure that we've got to try to be careful. Obviously, as people leave campus and go elsewhere, there's the risk of spreading the virus. And we have to be mindful of that for the sake of those who would be at the other end of it, which are often family, friends, aunts, uncles, church members, a host of people. We have literally been asked by the United States government, by the Center for Disease Control, by the Tennessee Independent College and University Association, and by several other groups. We have been asked to keep students on our campus as much as possible, even if there are outbreaks, if there are ways to do that, rather than precipitate a possible super spreader event by sending people out. And there are lots of examples of super spreader events that have happened as students have gone out. We know on our campus that nearly all, not all, but many of the COVID-19 positive cases we've had to deal with yet this semester, nearly all of them have occurred because students have gone off campus and then come back on campus. And that's of great concern. It's not a surprise to us, but we have to learn to deal with those realities. So we have to be sensitive to when we're gone, how long we're gone, and that's not just true for students. I'm sure the employees would like the spring break, and that many of them have made plans, and that they're not very happy about the decision either, because that's the nature of it. And as for myself, I'd love to have a longer spring break, and there are lots of things I'd like to do, but I do understand the nature of the challenge. I'll stop there. There's a lot I could say about it, which might or might not be helpful, but again, Dr. Young, perhaps you want to share about this decision a little more specifically in terms of how it was made and why it was made.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And like Dr. Smith, I do understand this is not a popular decision, not one that anyone would have recommended given anything other than the world that we're living in right now. Our process was prompted to some degree by the sharing of an academic calendar by Southern Adventist University, Southwestern Adventist University, and Union College. And those institutions, along with Southern, were in conversation about what changes would be necessary, COVID-related changes might be necessary in our spring academic calendar. And because we harmonize those calendars, we're in these conversations all the time. You may not be aware, but we actually share classes with Union College and with Southwestern Adventist University. We share a math curriculum and we share math courses routinely. And there are courses shared from other schools and departments also with these other institutions. And so having our calendars harmonized is one of the considerations that we think about. We also, when academic calendars are being considered, the process for making changes in those calendars is to have a conversation with the faculty In the end, it needs to be voted by the undergraduate council, the graduate council, the university senate, and finally by the board of trustees. That's the process for making changes to or amending the academic calendar. That process was followed in this instance, and the process was relatively quick this time because of a board of trustees meeting scheduled for October 4. It needed to be on that agenda. And the fact that this conversation, once we got the semester started, this conversation about the next semester then necessarily started. So we're having this conversation in September, toward the middle of September, once we've stabilized the fall term. And in order to get this on the board agenda, we had very little time to make that happen. I will say that I've been in higher education for 39 years now. About 20 of those years have been in academic administration. And I have never seen in those years an instance where the kinds of changes that we've made to our academic calendar for the fall, for the winter, and I might add for the winter 20 term as well, have needed to be made. I've never seen anything like it, and I pray that we can go back to a world where our academic calendar can be very stable. You may not know this, but our academic calendar is voted for a 10-year period of time. We have a 10-year academic calendar. You can look in 2027 and see when the university has planned its semesters to start, to stop, when our graduation ceremonies occur, when the last day to add a class is. And so it's highly unusual for us to need to change calendars. But the overarching goal of these changes is to be able to continue to provide face-to-face classroom experiences for our students. If we have a large outbreak of COVID-19 on our campus, we will be forced into another mode of delivering education. That's something you've told us you do not want, and we also prefer face-to-face classroom experiences also. Given this, it seemed wise to delay the start of the semester 14 days after the start of the year, when many families will be getting together to celebrate the new year. So our start of semester was delayed by 1 week. And given that if we were to delay the end of our semester by 1 week, we wanted to find a way to end on time. That involved the spring break. I will say that it's also our desire, as the president alluded to, that our students not travel significantly during the semester while they're on our campus. This is a significant additional risk factor for the campus. And by shortening the break, we were hoping more of our students would plan to stay nearby during the break. The original proposal was modified by the University Senate. We had originally proposed a calendar where the midterm break would be 1 day in the middle of a week. And that conversation about the mental health of both our students and our faculty needing some time to let down during the middle of the term was a prominent one at the University Senate, and one that eventually led the Senate to modify the original proposal to the one that's been voted by the Senate and the Board of Trustees. And that is a 2-day break, a Thursday and Friday break. We still hope students will choose to not travel during the break, use the time to recenter, to gain composure, to take some mental health days. That's certainly the intention of the break. But in the end, keeping our campus reasonably safe from COVID, reasonably low levels of COVID on our campus is the overarching consideration that was looked at as these changes were considered and proposed and voted.
So Dr. Smith and Dr. Young, based on your responses, this question was actually given to me by and not sent to Slido or sent earlier or via email. It was actually given to me by a student who's in our audience. So does that mean, based on what you are saying, should students interpret what you are saying as this decision is set in stone? That there is no communication that could occur at present to change the university's minds?
Dr. Young is more familiar with the process for that than I am, but I would make an educated guess that it's a decision that's been made, and I wouldn't expect it to change, especially because you have 3 Adventist colleges and universities all living with the same decision and applying it to the academic calendar. And the 3 are part of a consortium that's an experiment, if you please, to give study to how Adventist colleges and universities can better collaborate with each other. And so we've been doing quite a bit of pioneering with this, and it's been quite successful to this point. So given that dynamic, I would think it would be very difficult, but Dr. Young, you would understand better than I would.
Yes, I don't see the university changing from this decision unless we were to go back to our original calendar, which would place us at dissonance with the Union and Southwestern campuses. Now, I will say that Union College, although an initiator of this conversation in some ways, and also an initiator of the idea of starting a week later, has chosen a different path at this point. In other words, we were all part of that initial conversation, but they've chosen to go a different way. And they are going in a way that is starting on time and then taking one day off here and one day off there and another day off there in a way that I don't think we could replicate at this point. But Southwestern Adventist University is on our calendar, and well, I should say that we're on the same calendar at this point with some minor variations.
Dr. Negron, I think one thing we all have to keep in mind, again, it's a COVID-19 world, and it's not a world that's normal. It's not a world we know much about. It's certainly not a world any of us are used to. As far as I know, it's not a world any of us like. We'd love to get past it. But many of the decisions we're making right now, and I think this is one of them, represent our concerns about how COVID-19 is transmitted to others. And I'm not getting into the science of that. I'm not sure I'd be fully equipped to do that. But we know that probably very close to 40% of those who pass the virus on to others are what we call asymptomatic. It's such a highly unusual condition, and that often that's people in the age range of our college students. And it's one of the main reasons why the government and a number of government groups and other groups are pleading with universities to keep young adults as close to campus as possible rather than send them home, because the potential for the increase of transmission and for super spreader events is multiplied many times if students go anywhere and interact with other populations. It's just the nature of the condition. It's not anybody's fault. In fact, it's the most natural thing in the world to want to be together as a family, to want to do things together, especially to be together with friends. And we know spring break has its own traditions that a lot of college students appreciate. We are trying our best to minimize transmission. And one of the reasons why, to be honest with you, is that we have about 500 employees. And a number of those employees are at a very high risk category for being vulnerable to COVID-19. And they have concerns as well. They are brave people. They are doing what they can to make it possible for us to have a live learning experience on our campus, but they are vulnerable. And according to the degree that our students don't follow or don't do some of the things that we're trying to decide might be best, to that same degree, not only are those students' own parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, church members, and whoever more vulnerable to COVID-19, but so are our own employees. And we're trying to keep all of ourselves as safe as we can during this time until we have what we're all looking forward to, which is a return to something a little more normal.
Okay. Before we go off this topic, are there any students who are in the audience right now who wish to express an opinion or make a statement at this time? We do have several other questions, but perhaps you have a comment you'd like to make. Okay, yes, we do. So Maddie, we are going to unmute you. Maddie, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. So, no matter what happens, we're still gonna have students that leave the campus. Are you gonna ask everybody where they went, and if they went far, are you gonna quarantine them? Like, what's gonna happen around spring break?
That's a great question, Maddie, and I have not heard any discussion as to what the expectation would be for students who do travel during that time. I don't personally have any reason to believe that students are going to be grilled when they return to campus as far as what they did and where they were and who they were with. But we are going to certainly need to rely on the students' integrity to self-report if during spring break they know they were with somebody who proved positive with COVID, or they had some significant exposure, or they themselves became sick during that time, whether or not they've been tested yet when they returned to campus. So when we started school this year, we started that first day of classes with a number of students in quarantine because of things that had happened in their lives prior to the start of school. Again, most of that triggered from off-campus experiences. That certainly can happen after spring break. If it turns out that we have students coming back who do test positive, who are sick, or who have been exposed to COVID-19 as they have traveled around. And the same would be true for our employees. I'm sure we have some employees who have spring break plans just as the students do. And I'm sure that there will be employees who will try to get away for the weekend. And, we're certainly not going to stop them from that, but they all face the same dilemma. Where did they go? What was their experience? Are they returning well and whole? Have they been exposed and what have you? So I don't know, Dr. Negron, really student life is your arena. So maybe you've given this some thought. I'm not aware of any expectation we have about that right now, except to encourage students not to travel if they don't have to, or try to at least be careful when they travel so we can accomplish our safety goals and keep an on-campus live experience going next semester.
So Maddie, we have no plans to change the way that we are doing contact tracing. So in other words, our contact tracing will continue to occur only after we have a positive case on campus, and not occur before we have a positive case on campus. Okay, so we do not intend to ask students where they went, if they were in groups. We intend to continue to do the same type of approach the virus in the same manner that we're approaching it right now. Unless the CDC asks us to do something differently, and I guess I just need to qualify my statement that way. We have no plans to do contact tracing any differently.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions on this topic? Because I know it's one sensitive to a lot of students, or any other statements before we move on to another question. Okay then. This next question has to do with our tent. Since Southern is putting walls now on the white meeting tent for Student Week of Prayer, why can't we go back into the church for meetings?
That's a good question, and it's one that we've all had. In fact, I think the walls on the tent going up are evidence that we've been thinking about this and the need to do it. This weekend, the weather's going to turn cooler, possibly significantly cooler, certainly at night. And we're heading toward a time of year where that will probably be more and more the case. The tent was purchased as a provisional measure to try to make that community worship experience possible in a COVID-19 world where we have to have that physical distancing and what have you. And I do think that we probably eventually hope to get back into the church, but the church is its own entity. We don't run the church. So we have to partner with the church, and they're wonderful partners. So we do work together, but we have to work with them. And they have only this last Sabbath started their own worship services up again. There's still one worship service that is not meeting in the church. They have not yet started their children's Sabbath schools, and they just started, I think, the adult Sabbath schools about a week before that. And they are just now implementing their safety measures and protocols, not only for themselves, but for those who would use their facility. And so I'll ask Joseph Kabaz to comment on this because he meets regularly with them. And maybe you want to share some insights.
Thanks, Dr. Smith. I think you answered that perfectly. I do appreciate the question. I think it's a very good question. We want to make sure that not only are the worship participants safe when we're worshiping together, but they're also comfortable as well as we are together. So I have been in dialogue with the senior pastor at the church, at Collegedale Church, and they've always been very open to us worshiping there. As was mentioned, we don't own the church, even though it's on the campus of Southern Adventist University. So we would just need to work on them with that. But we would be very open to being there as they're now transitioning back indoors from being outdoors. We're certainly very open to having that conversation and what worship would look like going back into the church. We would just need to make sure that we can continue to have the same safety protocols as we had in the outdoor tent, still being able to take place in the church to make sure our students are safe.
A related question then, student here admits to being a little confused. If we are safe being 6 feet apart in outdoor settings without masks, why is it that Southern is mandating that all of us wear masks in the outdoor meeting tent? Are we safe at 6 feet, or are we not safe?
Dennis, I love that question, because it's a great illustration of something that's just kind of applicable to the whole COVID-19 world, which is if you can find universal agreement on almost anything, then you better stick with it because it's going to be hard to find. 6 feet is a distance that's probably most commonly expressed as safe, often if people are wearing masks, depending, indoors or outdoors. And of course, in our Vespers, our students are seated not only with that kind of distance between them, but they also wear masks. But I do hear 6 feet cited more than any other particular figure. I also hear 10 feet. I don't know if you asked this question, if you've read the research or watched on YouTube some of the experiments that have been done about virus transmission that trace the droplets from a person's mouth onto a nearby area. But I can guarantee you that you wouldn't want to be within 6 feet of somebody else unmasked, even outside, if there was a way to give yourself a little better protection, because droplets have been tracked to, and I don't know, maybe some of the other members of the administration know exactly how far. I believe they've been tracked up to 10, 12 feet or more in some cases. It's just in most cases, not further than 6 feet. So is it 6 feet safe? Is it 6 feet not safe? As far as I know, it's the distance most people agree at this point, not everybody, provides the safest distance especially if you're masked. If you're not masked, then certainly outdoors. And anybody else who'd like to jump in on that, go ahead.
I could share a
Dr.
little
Smith,
bit. Sorry, Dennis. Yeah.
go ahead, Joseph. Go ahead, Doctor.
I think just a little nuance with our Vespers program is that it's considered a mass gathering. And for mass gatherings, we're bringing hundreds of people in one place, in one location. And what the CDC guidelines have shared is that whenever there's mass gatherings, it's safer to have masks rather than just the occasional smaller groups meeting together. So we've wanted to follow those CDC guidelines, and that's what they've recommended.
I will add that so far, our statistics are showing that every single one of our positive cases on campus, except for one, I know of only two, except for one, every single one of them occurred in a mass gathering setting. And all of those gatherings weren't nearly as large as our Vespers gatherings. So all of them except for one occurred in a mass gathering setting without masks on. So having masks on outside is safer, but it's not, you know, we are not certainly immune in that setting from spreading the virus. Okay. Any comments, additions to that? If not, we have another question here. This is in regards to Southern hiring students to police fellow students regarding mask mandate. Why would the university implement methods to intimidate the student population into compliance of rules that are being forced upon the public?
Again, probably a good question. Personally, I wasn't aware that was happening and can't speak to it much. I have neither witnessed it nor been involved with it. I do think that there are some students, as part of their duties, who have been asked to remind other students of the importance of wearing masks, but not aware of any penalties or any strong arm tactics or anything that would be akin to what we think of as policing or even anything necessarily uncomfortable. But perhaps Dr. Negron, you can speak to this, or somebody who knows more about it than I do.
Well, Dr. Smith, I know of two situations in which students have been hired to help with compliance. One is during intramurals. They're being asked to help with compliance, primarily because there's just one person who runs intramurals, and that person has to run from field to field to field to make sure that the intramurals are going well, running smoothly on any given evening, and referees and umpires are not in a position to be able to ask for compliance because they are concentrating on making sure that a game is going smoothly. The other situation that I know of has been in some of our lab classes. As you may aware, some of you who may be in labs we are having to teach large lab classes in two different labs at the same time. And oftentimes the professor, I should say, not just oftentimes, but always, it's impossible for the professor to be in two different rooms. And so professors have requested that TAs, lab assistants, help with having compliance in the room or the lab that he or she is not in. Those are the times. I'm not aware of any intimidation tactics that are being used. I would be concerned about that. But those are the only situations in which I know of students being used to help with compliance.
Carolyn, are you aware of anything with this? You deal a lot with COVID-19 policy, but other than what Dennis, I guess, had just mentioned, what might there be?
I am not aware of any instances where students are being paid to police or coerce or anything like that. I'm sorry. I don't know. Oh, all the times. So I'm sorry, I don't know of that. I mean, we encourage everyone to remind each other, but no, we don't have student officers patrolling campus or anything, so I'm not.
Something that may seem similar to policing, and I guess students might see that would call this narking, and that is that the student helpers during intramurals, when having difficulty getting compliance, will ask a faculty member to help in that situation. And so that may be what is being referred to here.
Okay, well, I don't know what else we might say on that. We're certainly not trying to encourage a police state. But we do want to collaborate and support each other. And I'd just like to make a free commercial right now that we are getting closer to the end of the semester. I think we have every reason to believe that we can make this work, not only this semester, but next semester. And I know that COVID-19 fatigue is a real thing. And it's not just for students, it's for presidents and employees and others. And it just kind of wears you down. But I'd like to encourage everybody, employees and students alike, to just continue to do the simple things we're asking, because it is working. And it's making it possible for us to be together in a learning environment, even though things aren't perfect, seemingly much better than it would be if we have to go to a completely virtual world again.
Dr. Smith, we have another question, a totally different topic, and it has to do with identifying who our next president is going to be. Can you help our students understand how our next president is going to be selected? And will students get a chance to have any input?
You know, I can't be as helpful with that question as I would like to be, because I won't personally be involved in the process, and therefore won't be that informed about the process. I have asked some of those who will be involved in that process to please communicate with campus and all parties of campus as much as possible about it, because I think that's the best practice. But I don't know yet what will happen. What I do know is that there is a committee of the board called the Governance Committee, which will actually be meeting tonight in a virtual meeting, in which they will try to determine a good search process to be used for the next president. And then we'll go on to make a recommendation to the board itself as to what process they think should be followed. And then depending on the board's adoption of that or modification of it, the resulting process would be followed. But I don't know what that process will be. And therefore I can't make a prediction about who will have input and how that will be. I can just simply tell you, I would encourage as much input as possible, because I think that's important. But I will not be involved and probably not very informed about it.
Okay. Well, we have less than a minute to go before the end of our time. We do have some extra questions, other questions that actually are personal to the president. Favorite memory from his tenure as president? What were his biggest challenges? What will you miss most? Here's a very easy one, Dr. Smith, that you can answer in less than 10 seconds. What is your favorite food?
Well, just in a general category, let's say Italian. I just like almost any kind of Italian food.
Okay, thank you very much. We will pass on these questions and we will, any questions that were not answered, we will be sure that they will be answered by our president and posted for students to be able to see them on one of our various platforms, like communication platforms. I'd like to take 20 seconds to remind students that next week we do have another critical conversation. We are going to talk about Southern and its LGBTQ plus community. And Dr. Alan Parker will be the moderator for that conversation. I'd like to thank you all for being here today, and I wish you a God-blessed afternoon. Bye-bye.